Okay, well, good afternoon. I'm just here with Chris Soteo, and we're doing a rerun on the lecture I gave earlier in 2023 on the natural history and collection of butterflies in Trinidad and Tobago. I have broken my lecture down into three basic categories. They consist basically of the actual natural history and really geography of Trinidad, which makes it quite peculiar to the collection of butterflies. The second aspect of our talk is going to be on the classification and species numbers of butterflies in Trinidad and in a couple of other countries as a comparison. And the third aspect of it is going to be on the history of collecting butterflies in Trinidad and Tobago from the 1890s to the present day times. All right, so without further delay, the first thing I wanted to mention was our position as an island vis-a-vis Venezuela. And we can see here that the northeastern part of Trinidad is separated from Venezuela by not very much. And in truth, if you look at a larger map of South America, you will see that the Andes swings east in Colombia and continues eastwards through the northern part of Venezuela. And in truth and in fact, the north coast is the northeasternmost extension, or the easternmost extension, I should say, of the Andes Mountains. So we were originally part of South America. The southwest is probably slightly closer to Venezuela than the northwest is. But the southwest was part of Venezuela up until probably 11 or 12,000 years ago, when at the end of the last ice age, when the water levels rose. And that's when we were officially separated from Venezuela. So up until 11 or 12,000 years ago, we were joined to Venezuela at the southwestern peninsula. And as a result of that, we find that our butterflies, or Trinidad, I should say, is considered mainland, our fauna and flora are mainland rather than being island because of the recent geological history we have of connection to Venezuela. All right, this means that we have a number of endemic species, mainly at the subspecies level, and a few at the species level, but most of them are subspecies of butterflies found elsewhere in Venezuela and in other parts of South America. Butterflies were basically, uh, what should I say, the taxonomy of butterflies was basically done on the life histories of butterflies, what plants they use, the examination of the reproductive organs of the butterflies, and they were roughly grouped into what taxonomists thought was a reasonable classification. In those days, we had a maximum of 15 different uh, families of butterflies in the world, and Trinidad and Tobago, in fact, had 14 of those families of butterflies. So we are very well represented in terms of families in the butterfly world. Recently, however, what we have found is that more and more, and I have to agree with it, more and more recently, uh, we've gone to DNA, basically trying to find and collect DNA specimens of various butterflies, which is a far more accurate way of taxonomy. And what we have found is that of the 14 or 15 different families in the world, we now have six. Nine of the previous families have all been lumped together into the family Nymphalidae, which has now become this mega family of butterflies. All, as I say, related or more closely related on DNA concerns. If we look at the species breakdown here, we will find that the numbers of species in the various islands, we see here that Cuba, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Tobago, none of them have any more than 156 species. That's Cuba. Cuba has the largest number of butterflies, of which a lot are endemic. In Trinidad, we have in 1968 617 species. So that's a real major difference between small Trinidad and comparatively large Cuba. We are 608, 617 in 1968, but as of 2022, sorry, we jumped up to 781 species. So that's quite a significant increase of 164 species in approximately 54 years. One very interesting fact, which is not recorded in this slide here, is the fact that the number of butterflies in Canada is 272 species. North America, or the US, I should say, and Canada combined are 695 species. And if you take the US by itself, with places like Guam and Hawaii and so on, they have approximately 750 species. So, as regards the number of species, Trinidad is far and away a better place to collect butterflies than all of North America, and certainly all of the UK and all the other Caribbean islands. We have a far greater number, which is true also we see in our plants. We would see that this is exactly the same thing because of the fact that we are mainland rather than island. The reason, as I say, for the increase in the number of species recorded between 1968 and 2022 is the fact that, or I could probably put that into three categories. One would be reclassification, where we've had butterflies here, and we have realized recently that in truth and in fact, the one or what we thought was one species is more than one species. And the best example of that are the donkey eye butterflies, which I think we have a slide of. Yes, there we are. Those are the donkey eyes, or Junonius genus, as they are known. And recently we've come up with three different species in the last few years. So that one species has in fact become three different species. So that put in, and there are a couple of other examples like that, not very many, which could cause an increase in the number of species that we've seen in the last 54 years. The other thing is that we've had recent arrivals. And I say recent arrivals because they were not known previously. I got this butterfly first on the North Coast in uh, 2011, February 2011, and I got subsequently another one at Mount Hululu in September of 2011, um, which had not been recorded previously. Recently, however, they are all over the island. You can find them all down south. And in fact, I've actually raised this butterfly off of bamboo. So it's spread from isolated little spots on the northern range, island wide. So that's the reason I'm saying that this is a new introduction, because it's been it's now involved, or it's now in all parts of the island, and that has come in a very short period of time. So those would definitely have been identified previously and were not. So this is a new introduction. The other aspect, which is the most important as far as butterfly collectors are concerned, are recent discoveries. These butterflies have been here for a long time, but a lot of the times they are intensely localized, and that has caused problems. So if you're not in the correct place at the correct time, you never see the butterfly. So, and Scott Alston Smith, one of our recent or more recent collectors, Scott is the one who has come across most of these new discoveries. This is an example of intense localization. This Unica anna, this was discovered in, I should have that here somewhere, in the 1980s. Unica anna. I beg your pardon, that was we found that in Matura in March 2000, was the first record of Unica anna. And it's found on a road that leads down to the beach where the turtles come ashore, and it's a favorite spot for people seeing and visiting to look at turtles come up to lay eggs. Uh, that is the only spot that we know of where this butterfly, and it's probably 100, 200 yards max in length, and that is the only spot in the island that we have found this butterfly. So that, and most, as I say, of these new um, discoveries are intensely localized, and that's a classic example of why you have to be in the right place at the right time to pick up these butterflies. This is another one. This one has been known for a while, for quite a while. But this one I got at Point Good, and I have the dates on that. Yeah, 2010, September 2010. I saw these butterflies and reared them off of a plant in Point Good. It was known previously from the south of the island, um, but this butterfly that I got is from the north. And the interesting thing is that the food plant here in the north is found only in the offshore islands, Monas, Gasperi, etc., Chakachikari, and the northwestern part of the island. That plant is not found in the south of the island. So even this, though this butterfly was originally recorded from the south of the island, it obviously feeds on a different food plant, which we're still not too sure what it is. Uh, but that's what happens with butterflies. They don't just, the caterpillars don't just feed and eat a number of different plants. They are very, very picky and choosy. And perhaps one or two they'll feed on, and not any more than that. So the food plant in the south of the island is still to be discovered. So this shows you the reason why whenever we get together as butterfly people and talk about collecting, um, at the moment there's so few of us that we always talk with people who are interested with a view of hopefully they'll develop an interest and start collecting. Because, as I say, most of these new discoveries are so localized that the more people you have collecting, the more likely it is that you're going to come across these butterflies. So that's just a plug to get more and more people into collecting butterflies. The third part of our talk and the final part of our talk is an actual history of the collecting of butterflies. Uh, this list here I have is chronological, and we see that the first extensive and serious attempt at collection for identification purposes um, started in 1891 with the founders of our Free Naturalist Club. They spent quite a lot of time collecting butterflies and sorting butterflies with a view of trying to determine how many species we have. So that was 1891. That's the first real record. In 1898, William Kay from the UK, uh, he came on a number of occasions actually, and he collected butterflies, categorized them, and had listings of them. And I think he came 4 or 5 times to Trinidad. So from 1898 to 1921, which I think was his last visit to Trinidad, he had reached a total of 462 species. So by 1921, we were up to 462 species. In 1914, so Norman Lamont comes on to the picture, and he lived in South and did a lot of his collecting in the South. Yeah, here is a photograph of Sir Norman Lamont and some butterflies we have here, um, which are named after Sir Norman Lamont. And he actually, these are pyrids, and he actually there's another pyrid as well, another subspecies of a pyrid, which also carries the name Lamonti. So Sir Norman Lamont has his name attached to two different pyrids that have been caught in Trinidad. He was an avid collector, and most of, in fact, I think all of his collection is now in Scotland. He sent everything back home where he came from. So his collection we no longer have access to. The next person to come on the scene was Robert Dick. Robert started collecting in the 1920s, and then in the 1930s, he was joined by Malcolm Barker and Frank Ambad. And Malcolm Barker is probably the father of lepidoptery in Trinidad. Malcolm's name is the name that resonates above any other, quite honestly, because he collected extensively, and he's written the only book on Trinidad butterflies. Um, he collected eventually with his friends, Clive Urick and Frank Ambad, and Robert Dick again was part and parcel of the collecting team when Malcolm Brower was around in the 1930s. Interestingly, the Barker collection, um, the Angostura Barker collection, is an amalgam of Robert Dick's butterflies, Malcolm Barker's butterflies, and Frank Ambard's butterflies. Barker was able to acquire these other two collections from Robert Dick and Frank Ambard, and put everything into one collection, which is now known as the Barker Angostura Butterfly Collection. But Malcolm, as I say, was the one who was a real trailblazer as regards lepidoptery in Trinidad. Clive Urick came a little later on, and Clive was very fortunate because Clive lived on his estate in Sandy Grande, an estate called Sans Souci. And that estate was amazingly blessed with a number of species. So a lot of Clive's butterflies came directly from his estate in San Grande, and he didn't have to do too much in the way of traveling to find other butterflies. So Clive was very fortunate. We have a butterfly here. Yes, here we are. We have this. This is an endemic species, um, which is named after Clive Urick. It's a butterfly by the name of uh, Colospila eurici. So that's been named after Clive, and it's one of the few endemic species we have. We probably have 7 or 8 endemic species, and this is one of them. The other name that comes to mind after Clive Urick is Scott Olson Smith. Scott is the second father of Lepidoptera in Trinidad. Scott has the most amazing collection of Trinidad butterflies. Scott was amazingly uh, productive, and he travels all over the island, all sorts of various spots, collecting butterflies. And that Scott is mainly responsible for the increase of 118 species in 54 years, because Scott just made a point of collecting not just in a few choice localities, but Scott went everywhere and turned up so many other things that no one else had seen before. And there is a photograph in here of here we are of an endemic species named after Scott, and that is known as Agirogramana alstonai. Agirogramana alstonai. Um, this is a male here, uh, and that's named after Scott. So that's a number, that's a second rather, of our endemic species named after one of our collectors. Scott is still collecting today, but a lot of his collecting was done up until recently, because he now lives in Tobago, so he's not quite as as free to get away and collect as he was before, but he still does collect. In Scott's time, we have a number of other collectors. Julius Booz, brother of Hans, a younger brother of Hans, who a lot of you in the Field Naturalist Club will remember. There was Edward Rooks as well, who was very keen in his doing, but Edward no longer lives rather in Trinidad. He lives abroad. There's Colin Barker. Colin was the grandnephew of Malcolm. He collected for a while, but no longer collects. Ronnie Hernandez was one of the earlier collectors in the 1970s. And we have a shot here of Ronnie, yes, here we are. That's an endemic species, again, from Ronnie Hernandez. And that one is um, Zigliaria Hernandezi. Zigliaria Hernandezi. That's another rather of the endemic species that we have here. So that's a number of our locals. I came along in 1986, and with me there are a number of other collectors in the field still, most of whom are from overseas. There is John Morrell and there is Matthew Koch, who again a lot of the field naturalists will know of. Matthew writes regularly over the last 2 decades in the field naturalist yearly journal, and he's also got a butterfly named after him, but it doesn't bear his name. Um, this is it here. It's a thing called Siamese finca. which he discovered in Las Lomas. Um, and as far as we know, this is also an endemic species, very uncommon. But it's named Matthew was the original collector, even though it doesn't carry his name. As I mentioned just now, John Morrell comes regularly from the UK. He comes 2, 3 times every year and collects in Trinidad. He doesn't go anywhere else at this point in time. And John has built up quite a collection of Trinidad butterflies. The other one, as I say, who you all know, is Matthew Koch, who was stationed here with Cabby for a number of years in the 80s. And some of his butterflies are in the Cabby collection at UWI, but most of them Matthew has sent abroad to his home where he now lives. He doesn't come to Trinidad anymore, or very infrequently if he does. So most of his collection, most of his Trinidad collection, is now out of the country. There are a couple of other international collectors, or there are a couple of other collectors that we know of. One is Margaret Fountain, who came here actually on 3 occasions. Um, Most of her butterflies, again, are abroad in the UK. She sent most of hers away, and they're in various museums in the UK. I remember as a young boy, my father had a good friend called Peter Rochford, and I know Peter collected, and he had a collection. But whatever happened to his collection, I do not know. And there's another one, a man by the name of Frank Dabadie, who actually Matthew Koch refers to quite regularly, well, not quite regularly, but he does refer to him occasionally in his Living World journals. He mentions butterflies found in Tobago. And Frank Dabadie evidently, I think, was the warden in Tobago in the early 1900s. And he collected. Where his collection is, we have no idea. So as we can see, there's been a lot, and the names that I have mentioned here, there's a lot more names actually. I haven't. This is by no means an exhaustive list of the people who collected here. Um, so there have been a number of people who have collected here. Some of their collections, as I say, we know have been shipped abroad, but a lot of the local collectors, um, their collections just seem to have gone by the wayside. And my feeling is that the little bugs that destroy the butterflies, and butterflies have to be constantly curated. If you do not curate your butterflies, you're going to lose them. And I suspect very strongly that that is the reason why a lot of the local collectors, why their collections are no longer available to us, is because I suspect they've all been destroyed by these little bugs that get into collections, and they're the most annoying things. I mean, I've had butterflies in my collections which were fine for 15 years, and you come one day and you see these little mites on them, which cause a problem. So you have to be at them all the time, otherwise they just eat the butterflies, and before you know it, your butterflies are gone. So that's the other thing. Butterfly collecting is not just butterflies that are collected and put down, but it's an ongoing process of curation. You have to be at it all the time. Otherwise, you're just going to lose everything that you put years and years of hard labor and enjoyment into. And that's one of the things that we have to look at as well. But that's basically what I wanted to say, and just to give you an idea of what has gone on with butterflies, and to let you know that we are still one of the foremost spots for butterfly collecting in the world. There are other places that have more species than are found here in Trinidad, but a lot of those species are found in areas which are very difficult to get to. So, from a collector's point of view, the facility of collecting butterflies Trinidad is probably in the first three or four countries in the world for collecting because of the variety and the great number of different species that are encountered in a small area by and large, which is very accessible. So that's what I have to say, and I just thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share my experience as a collector, and as I say, to put in a plug for uh, more butterfly collectors in the field. Thank you so much.